Hi, everyone, and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode 22 When Two Becomes One, all about double feature. And we're going to be talking about the win rate data for different archetypes. We're going to look at cards that gained on the merger of two sets and the cards that maybe lost something on the combination of Crimson Vow and Midnight Hunt. We're going to touch on the key commons and uncommons. And we're going to look at the archetype stars. So, best signpost uncommon in each color combination, best card in each combination, and the card that I arbitrarily selected as the overperformer in a particular archetype. Right, so without further ado, let's start with my preamble. I always put in preamble before the actual presentation starts to give time for people to join in. And today I'm going to be talking about rearrangement puts life into a dead format. So we've been drafting Crimson Vow. Crimson Vow, correct. We've been drafting it already for some time, and it's been a long time. We started, if I remember correctly, 15th of November, something like that, 11th maybe. So it's been, well, a bunch of months already, and it's been a long time, and formats are not designed to be appealing for that long. And honestly, I don't think that Crimson Vow was a bad format. It was an interesting one. It was very well balanced in terms of power rankings of color combinations. So you could draft almost anything, which made it interesting. The bombs added an extra taste. There were some interesting build arounds, but it's not enough to keep me interested in drafting it for 3.5 months. So I actually waited quite eagerly on the release of double feature because I was curious how it's going to work. Because first of all, this rejuvenates, therefore the card choice in the presentation. Oh, by the way, I'm going to put my laser pointer so that I can draw attention to important things. Maybe not on this slide, but it rejuvenated the format and it put some life into it. It's also nice to get this nostalgic value of the Midnight Hunt cards, but also rearranging the format, especially in this way, makes it a completely different format, and it introduced quite a lot of change. So how you drafted, what you sort of memorized for the last 3 months in Crimson Vow, you can forget all about it and approach the format. Well, maybe not all of it, but you have to be flexible and change your strategies, make things differently, and that makes the format interesting. So I really hope that Wizards will not give up on that idea, because I know that there's been a lot of pushback about double feature, especially because the cards, cosmetics in the set look, let's put it dodgy on computer screens. I played with the cards and they actually do look decent in real life. They're not bad. It's maybe not my favorite cosmetic, but I'm generally not a fan of cosmetics. I'm a fan of playing the game. So I'm pretty sure it's still a good idea to make sets like that for draft only, but possibly at a lower price in retail, and possibly, I mean, do we really need the cosmetics for all of those cards? There's so many versions of everything right now that I don't think that we really need it. But having said that, drafting it both in paper and on Arena was a pleasure. It was a nightmare to follow it and watch it on MTGO because those cards just don't look good in digital. And I think that this is also a lesson for Wizards. If they want to make hype for their new expansion, they better make sure that the cards look good in the digital formats. And this is also a thing that I think artists can um, take into account, because I think that all the discussion about the um, mystery archive version of the Fateless Looting was basically because the card didn't look well on Twitter feeds and small screens of phones. And I think that the card looks much better. I saw the full scale picture of the art, and it looked pretty nice. I mean, again, it's not my style of art. I'm not a big fan, but I'm a big fan of Magic introducing interesting artworks into Magic, because if we have some misses in the artwork, we are going to also have some hits. And this is the thing that some people told about um, limited formats, that because wizards figured out this kind of formula, and they follow this formula to the dot. You get decent, very solid draft sets, but you will rarely get this kind of amazing draft format. Um, and I think it's the same with art. If you don't have some failures because you're trying new things, you're not going to have amazing art. And now, especially with some most popular artist slots currently being vacated, it would be nice to give a chance to people that have interesting vision and maybe will change how the cards look like. I mean, there is a good reason why stasis art is so popular, even if it's controversial. It at least introduced something completely novel to the Magic card, and still you look at it today and I think that, wow, it would be great if there would be more art like that. And I also think that it would be great if they would be more risky with formats. But problem, of course, is if they miss with the format, it's a lot of money for them. So I think that those rearranged sets where they don't gamble too much, but putting two sets together that creates a novel environment is a safe way of doing it. And especially in something like Arena, it doesn't cost them much to introduce that kind of stuff in the end of the format. All right, that was enough of me blubbing. Let's jump into the data. So just to give you the outline of the things, all data is from 17lands.com. Please visit, watch it yourself. I tried to put the most up-to-date version of the data. That's why we had a slight delay today, because obviously I had to do the presentation between when my daughter went to sleep, unfortunately, around 9 p.m. today and now, which is 10:30 right now. So I had to rush it. I had like lots of things prepared yesterday already, but with the data, I had to input it in the last moment. So all the graphs need to be made in the last hour or so. The data is based on around 46,000 games, which seems a lot, but actually some sample sizes for some archetypes are pretty small. So approach data with caution. Use it more as an inspiration and pointers than things set in stone. But nonetheless, it's pretty useful still, I think. And especially in some colors, it's already, the sample sizes are solid enough. So one big observation from the thing is that straight two color decks are better than splashing, and our splashing is still better than three color decks. So this is not a multicolor format. Last week I speculated that maybe the 5-color deck will be something, but it seems that they are not so easy to construct. And maybe there is one color pair that definitely wants to be splashing. Hi, Mercurio. As always, I make an exception for Mercurio because you should. I hope you're doing well and you're resting after your 14-hour marathon. The seminar is going well. We just started, so you didn't miss anything except for me blabbing about how I like the idea of mashing up two sets. We just literally are on the first data slide. Okay, so with that out of the way, 17lands.com, best website in terms of the Magic the Gathering data, especially when you're a limited player. Use it, support it, it's awesome. So let's go with the look at the color pair win rates. So the best color pair is very unsurprisingly Azorius. It was the best color pair in Midnight Hunt. It was the best color pair in the Crimson Vow. When you look at the more matured format, with skipping the first 2 weeks of the data, and without surprise, it's also the best color pair in double feature. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention one thing in the previous slide. Average 17 lands user win rate is 58.6%. That's insanely high. Like, it is insanely high for the average. Normally we skirt 55%, maybe 55.5. In some formats it was 54. 58.6 is damn a lot. This number is going down with each day. So I think that it usually is the case that people will try it once, and these are usually maybe less invested players. So maybe first couple of days you play against opponents that are not as versed in limited as people that are hardcore enough to actually install 17 lands and use it regularly. So that might be the reason. But still, even in that 58, 59% it was yesterday, uh, is massive. Like other formats, we'll see maybe 56% in the first week or so. Um, so with that caveat, keep in mind, made the analysis of the data a bit more difficult than usually it is, especially when you cross compare between format. Zach says, once I log on more games, it will go down. Don't worry. To that, I can only say that you will definitely try. Hey, Metal Mario, thanks for the sub. You will definitely try, and I'm sure that your win rate is lowering the averages, but I'm just afraid that you're not putting the big enough volume to impact the data. So that's your problem, I think, Zach. You have to play more to lower the 17 land users win rate. Okay. Best archetype in terms of win rate is Azorius, and very closely followed by Boros, which is sort of a surprise ish. And these two are better than anything else. Then we have Dimir, which was sort of speculated to be the most powerful archetype. But I think that the problem with Dimir is it's overdrafted and you don't get good enough cards. I think color combination is strong, but it's challenged by other people's on the pod, so you will not get like an open Dimir deck very often. It's the most played archetype as well. And still, despite being the most played, it posts a very solid 60% win rate by the 17 lens user. So it's not bad at all. But it's 2 percentage points different from Azorius and Boros, sort of. Then we have a massive cluster of, I would say, 5 different archetypes. And is it slightly better, but like 0.5%? Well, that's not a number really. It can change overnight. And then we have like Orzhov, Rakdos, Golgari, Selesnya. These are all between like 59.5% and 58.5% win rates. And then we have sort of poorer archetype in Simic and Gruul with the 57.9 and 57.1% win rate. So Gruul being the poorest. And it was maybe not completely surprising because Gruul was poorest in mid. And I think that there were good reasons why it was the poorest archetype in Midnight Hunt, and adding the Crimson Vow cards did not help it too much. Now, the only problem with this analysis is that it looks at the color pair win rate when you only look at the decks that only contain those 2 colors. In most of my analyses, I look at the combined data sets of 2 color pairs and 2 color pairs and a splash. Because I think it's fair. People splash relatively frequently, and it would be nice to capture the power of that splash and how much does it affect win rates. So I did just that. So first of all, these are the color pair win rates when you have a splash. So this is only deck that have a splash. And what you can see here, that Simic, which is pretty poor, it's one of the lowest win rate. 58% is not bad at all. It's just poorest in the group of very powerful archetypes. Yeah, Zach very aptly observed that 4 lowest win rate archetypes are all containing green. And you can see that in the data, that green is definitely the weakest color of the bunch. Right. But Simic being the worst when you don't splash becomes the best when it does splash. And in fact, it has a higher win rate with splash included than without. So I think that the lesson from that is that if you play Simic, don't be afraid of splashing. It probably makes it better. Question is what you want to splash. And I think that unfortunately the sample size is not big enough to answer that question, but it would be interesting to look at it at the end of the format. The only problem, of course, is that at the end of the format, no one cares. But yeah, Simic has the highest win rate in terms of splash decks. And then we still have Azorius, and then we have Boros, Gruul, Orzhov, Rakdos, Selesnya. They're all in sort of like same cluster. And then 3 decks that are not particularly good in splashing is Dimir, Golgari, and Izzet. And Golgari is especially surprising because, when you have green, you might as well splash, but it seems like Golgari doesn't splash very well. So after I looked at that, I said, well, maybe Simic actually gains some if you look into the totality of the decks with and without Splash. So I did exactly that. Here we have the win rates with no Splash, and here we have win rates both of the pure decks and the ones that include Splash. So these are bigger sample sizes. And you can see every single color loses on splashing, more or less. Some of them lose a lot because the splash decks are way poorer. Like Izzet, we see a 1 percentage point difference between the no splash versions and all the decks, including the splash ones. But it's basically because Izzet splashes very poorly. It's got only 52.7% win rate when it splashes. It doesn't splash very often because it doesn't need to, most likely. But we have Simic, who actually has a higher win rate when it does splash. Huh. That's interesting. There's some discrepancy there, but it doesn't matter. So we have the 57.8% including the splashes, and 56.8 when splashes are not included. And that puts it, from the like one of the poorest archetypes. I'm sorry, this graph is slightly off because it has the personal splash data from yesterday, not from today. The rushing of the presentation means you miss something, and I must have used the old data for putting the red ones, but these ones are definitely the good ones because I changed them manually. But the changes are very minimal here, so it shouldn't make a big difference. Still, it jumps from being like the weakest archetype into this bigger pack of Rakdos, Orzhov, Izzet, and Selesnya. So it's more or less at the same position, while Golgari drops from being like middle of the pack into the dead last because of the splash decks. Because not only does perform poorly when it splashes, it's also that it's being splashed with very frequently. So people like to splash their Golgari decks, and it doesn't yield very good results. While in Simic, it's the opposite. People do love to splash with when they play Simic, and it does work. So I don't know exactly what's the difference between them, and I don't have an idea why would it be so, but this is what we can see from the data that, splashing Simic, good. It might be because the Root Coil Creeper is an additional source of fixing that they have, and Golgari doesn't have such a thing. Maybe for some other reasons, but in general, it splashes well. Maybe because, Farmer works very well in that deck because it does additional things that the deck wants to do, namely milling cards into graveyard, and you can reuse them. So maybe, it's more synergistic to try to splash in there. Maybe for some other reasons, maybe just pure luck because of the sample sizes not being large. But having said that, I think that there was over 1,000 games played in splashed versions of Simics and over 1,000 games with splashed versions of Golgari. So we're talking about decent sample size, not amazingly and not shocking, but at least decent. Okay, so from the color pairs, let's look at the cards that maybe are overperforming what they were doing before, and cards that maybe underperform compared to what was happening in their individual sets. Now, the problem with that analysis that I had was the big difference in win rates between sets. So, how I looked at it, at how do cards overperform the average win rate of the format. So if this format has 58.6% average win rate when you look at all the decks, I took it as a baseline, and if a card had like 59.6, it had a plus 1 percentage point, and if it had 57.6, it had minus 1 percentage point. So based on this calculation, I could look at how a card overperforms the average win rate of the format. It's not a perfect measure, but other measures were much more laborious, and I didn't have time to do that. And then I did the same for each individual set. So I did the same for cards in mid, compare them to the average win rate in Midnight Hunt, and for cards in Crimson Vow, and compare them with the average win rate in Crimson Vow. And then if the win rate above baseline in Double Feature is bigger than the win rate above baseline in Crimson Vow or in Midnight Hunt, it means that the card overperforms in double feature compared to its original set, and vice versa. If the win rate in above baseline in vow or mid is higher, then the card underperforms in double feature by this by exclusion. And of course, if it's equal, then the card is doing equally well. So okay. So these are the top 10 overperformers. But I put this data, I want to put a lot of caveats on that. Lots of those cards are based on a very, very small sample size. So like Nature Embrace, Pax Betrayal, Homestead Courage, Brimstone Vandal, not very big sample sizes. Vampire Slayer, Daybreak Combatants, not big sample sizes. Blood Pact, Ardent Elementalist, Bladebrand. Furthermore, lots of these cards were relatively poor in their original format. So Nature Embrace was doing really badly. That's why it has a 6.9 percentage point improvement over what it was doing in this original format. Pax Betrayal was also not doing super great, but it posted a big improvement, and actually in double feature it overperforms the win rate of the format. So I put an asterisk next to the cards that overperform in double feature but didn't overperform in their original format, and I put double asterisk for cards that overperformed in their original format and now they overperform even more, and that makes it Fierce Retribution is the card that improves a lot. And this is like a super important result. Fierce Retribution has phenomenal numbers in the double feature format. I don't know for what reason is that, but this is something that cannot be ignored. It does really well. And conversely, Homestead Courage is doing pretty well, and don't sleep on this card in this format. I think it's much stronger than it was in its original format. Pax Betrayal is a tricky case because it's based on a very small sample size, and the other threatened effect is doing pretty poorly. So I don't know what to do with it. Is it just random variance here, and maybe the actual truth is middling? Because I don't see the reason why Pax Betrayal will be so much better than the Blood something, whatever the one from Crimson Vow that does it. A couple of interesting cards in here as overperformance is Blood Pact and Ardent Elementalist. I think that because there's a bunch of rare spells and because there are more rares in the format, Elementalist can bring back impactful things, and it requires a particular deck. But I've seen Elementalist doing some wonderful things. There is a very good game by Sam Black. If you want to find it, I think I put a link to it in Corticol's Discord server, which hopefully some of you are in. Exactly, Zach. There is no way that Pax is better than Bloody. Is it also Bloody Betrayal? They just made 2 betrayals? Lazy naming, but okay. So yeah, I just don't I would be cautioned against putting too much weight on this because it's also based on small sample size. So because lots of those cards are weird cards, fringe cards, I think that if you look at this graph, I would really put a lot of weight on Fierce Retribution as a massive overperformance performer in this format, and the rest of them just take a mental note that the card is doing well. Vampire Slayer, especially, weirdly doing very good, but a lot of white and red 2-drops are doing better. So that's maybe a part of a broader picture. So on top of those top 10 overperformance, I also hand selected some of the cards that I think might be interesting. And here they are. First of all, Moonrager Slash. The card was doing sort of on par with the average win rate in Midnight Hunt, but there was a problem with red. Red was not particularly strong, while red and Crimson Vow was very strong. And I think that this boosted Moonrager Slash. It's like a super good addition from Midnight Hunt to Crimson Vow centric red decks in the double feature. So Moonrager Slash definitely overperforming by 2.3 percentage points, which is decent amount. Yeah, I think that everyone can figure out that Moonrager Slash is way better here than it was in its original format. Second card I highlighted is Revenge of the Drowned. Now, Revenge of the Drowned was already a very, very significant overperformer in the in Midnight Hunt. It was already 4 percentage point over the average win rate for the format. Basically, because it was played in the very, very, very good blue-black and blue-white and blue-green decks. But it still gained 1.9 percentage points. So now it's like almost 6% above the average win rate. And the average win rate is also insanely high. So Revenge of the Drowned is a superstar of this format in terms of win rate so far. It's like by far the best common, and very few uncommons are actually having a higher win rate than Revenge of the Drowned. So don't pass them if you are in blue. Don't sleep on it. Another card we have that says good overperformer is Blood Petal Celebrant. I told you that the white and red 2-drops are so sorry, Gersites is asking, those percentages of improvement are normalizing the average win rate to make them even across the 3 options. Yes, exactly, that's what I did. So so basically I take the card win rate minus average win rate for the format. So basically card win rate in double feature minus average win rate in double feature, and card win rate in Midnight Hunt minus average win rate in Midnight Hunt, and so on, so on. So yeah, it's normalized for that. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to compare. Yeast out, says Zach. Enjoy your yeast. It's called Thrash. Okay. So yeah, this is the trend of the 2-drops being relatively decent in the format. Now this only looks at the commons, but we also saw the same thing in the uncommons section. A card that did improve quite a lot, and I think is interesting to mark, is Dawnheart Rejuvenator. The card has pretty decent numbers. It's not over the average win rate for the double feature, but remember that the win rate for double feature is insanely high, but it's almost there. It's like, I think 0.3, 0.5 percentage point below the average win rate. And the card was not impressive in Midnight Hunt. So I think that it's interesting to note that Rejuvenator is good. And I think that when you think that cards that are decent are the 2-drops in this format, it seems, Dawnheart Rejuvenator is the ultimate 2-drop hoser, because not only you gain some life, you also get a good blocker against all the 2s, and it ramps you into bigger things. So it's an interesting, and it fixes as well. So yeah, a good card to keep in your mind. Then we have Chill the Grave and Neonate Rush, the sort of package that you might want to have in your blue-red tempo spells deck, for example. But also Chill the Grave will do good in anything that wants to survive the later game and then drop like proper bombs, which is something that will happen in this format quite a lot, either in some kind of a blue-green shell or maybe blue-black. Of course, you always get the cost discount in there. And Neonate Rush is still a good removal. The adding of an additional format didn't change much in there, even though there's not many X1s that are playable in Crimson Vow. Neonate Rush is still the thing to do. Another card, Doom Dissenter. They are all at around 1.4 to 1.3 percentage point improvement over their original formats. Doom Dissenter improved. And I think that, part of it is that there are surprisingly a lot of sacrifice synergies in the Midnight Hunt. You got, the Awakener, which does very well. And I think that curving in Awakener, Dissenter, Sack Dissenter, Slam for 4, and leave a 2/2 blocker, that's a very good curve out. So maybe that's one of the reasons why Dissenter is so good. But also the creatures with exploit, I think, are improved in the format in general, and because they are better, then Dissenter becomes better, because blue-black in Crimson Vow only lacked maybe some reach, some card quality, and then adding a couple of Organ Hoarders to a blue-black deck makes it way better, and by that Doom Dissenter piggybacks sort of on this increase in card power in the blue-black archetype. There we have Wolf Strike and an honorable mention of Evolving Wilds, which has a 1.6 percentage point increase over the average of Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow. I took an average of those two formats. So Evolving Wilds, way better in this format. And I think that this has something to do with splashing for bombs and splashing correctly, which makes me think that, lots of the decks that splash but have low win rate are the decks where people splash, but they don't make sure that they have a good fixing in those decks. So worth noting, Evolving Wilds is improving. So maybe this drop off in the win rate of the splash decks is related to the fact that people don't splash. If you are not sure how to splash, and if you would like to learn maybe a bit more about it, I recommend my seminar from a couple of weeks ago about splashing. You can find it on YouTube, so give it a visit. It's YouTube Sherkovitz. And there you have some data about splashing, some strategies, what works, what doesn't, and so on. So these are the overperformers. Now let's look at the underperformers. And this is the top 10. We have cards that are, Ritual Guardian, a 3/2 is not going to be great in a format where the 2 drops are powerful, because you pay 3 mana for something that dies to any of those 2 drops. Otherworldly Gaze has markedly lower numbers, and I think that this has partly to do with the fact that the decks that wanted Otherworldly Gaze don't come together so often, and the Crimson Vow cards are not playing very well with Otherworldly Gaze. So I think that the card is just losing a lot. Also, Crimson Vow introduces way better cards to play if you want to self-mill, notably Mulch. So probably just don't need Otherworldly Gaze. You'd rather have a Mulch and maybe sometimes draw 3 cards for 2 mana, and sometimes draw 1 and mill 3 good cards like Otherworldly Gaze would do without the draw. And those decks are usually mana hungry, so Mulch will play a much better role than Otherworldly Gaze, and that's probably why it doesn't do so well. So maybe, some fringe cases it will be good in if you are so lucky to open a couple of Ominous Roosts, but apart from that, no. Here, as you can see, Bloody Betrayal is actually underperformer, which makes me very suspect of the numbers on the Pax Betrayal, but also it makes me suspect on the numbers of Bloody Betrayal. I think that the sample sizes here are just not big enough. Snarling Wolf underperforms compared to the average of the 2 formats, so I wouldn't probably play it, which is, you want there to 2 drops in this format for some reason. Courier Bat, it seems that the synergy combination for the life gain was just not good enough. And I think that Bat Whisperer is another victim of 2 drops being good. It decreased a lot in its win rate. It was pretty decent in mid actually, but it's just not as good in the double feature. And Rugged Recluse is quite logical. Rugged Recluse required a lot of blood to be a functional card, and you just don't get enough blood because you only have half of the cards. So unless you have a deck that somehow got most of the Crimson Vow cards, Rugged Recluse is going to be probably poor as a choice of playing, because you will not flip it frequently enough. And one card that also decreased in its performance is Undying Malice. And all the cards that I mentioned are between 3.5 percentage points for Rugged Recluse, down to minus almost 5 percentage points for Ritual Guardian. So very steep drop for that card. But of course, from among those cards, maybe, Bat Whisperer was a very playable card. Maybe Undying Malice. The rest were fringe playables, I would say. So I also picked some underperformers that have a slightly higher statue in the format. And we start with Diagraph Horde. Now, it underperforms by 3.2 percentage points. Does it mean the card is bad? No. It still has an elevated win rate compared to the average. It's just that in Midnight Hunt itself, it have a vastly elevated win rate. It's sort of the reverse of what Fierce Retribution was. Fierce Retribution was just above average win rate for Crimson Vow. Now it's comfortably above the average win rate. Diagraph was comfortably above average win rate in Midnight Hunt, and now it's just barely above the average win rate. So the card is still powerful, but it's less powerful than it was in its original format. Um, so keep that in mind that maybe you can drop it ever so slightly in the priority list. Um, Another card that has the same problem is Bloodcrazed Socialite, and I think that this suffers from the same thing as Rugged Recluse. You don't have as many blood tokens, and the Bloodcrazed Socialite's main power was being able to attack as a 5/5 menace. Now it just won't happen so frequently. So it dropped by 2.8 percentage points. The other two cards that have a slightly different problem is Ratchet Throng and Ancestral Anger. These cards were powerful in multiples, and now you will just not consistently get those multiples. And even if you get multiples, you might not get, you want to have maybe 4 or 3 Throngs. Now you maybe sometimes get 2 of them. And the same with Ancestral Anger. So they drop by 2.7, 2.3 percentage points. Weirdly, Siege Zombie is poor. I don't know what to do with it. I think that maybe the reason for that is you want to combine your Decade Zombies with some exploit triggers, and because of that, you don't build up as broad a battlefield as you did, because you sacrificed some of those Decade Zombies much earlier than you normally did in the older format when you just accumulated 4 or 5 of them. And of course, you get as well fewer of the Decade synergies, so maybe Siege Zombie is not good in that. And you don't put it in the aggressive decks, you put it in a deck that wants to grind out in the end, and it just doesn't have enough reach because of that. It dropped by 2.5 percentage points. Three other cards are 5/6 drops, and I'm talking about Rot-Tide Gargantua, Falconrat Celebrants, and Flourishing Hunter. All of them underperformed compared to their original format. But Celebrants was a very good card, so despite underperforming in double feature, it's still a decent card. It's just like less decent. It also has maybe something to do that you will get those more rares per pack, and lots of the rares are high mana cost things that impact the game more than the common would. So because you have access to more of the super powerful top end, maybe the common powerful but still not busted top end is losing a bit of its appeal. And it's also something to do with the aggro deck being slightly better. So sometimes you just won't have time to play them, or you have to play and chump with them or something like that. So they lose a bit. And the last two cards that I select as notable underperformers are Bleed Drive, which is still a good card, but less busted than it was in WoW itself, possibly because other cards like Eaten Alive, I want to say, are actually overperforming, so they are much better. And Kindly Ancestor is doing a bit worse, which is strange because with all those 2/3s, I would expect it to do better, but it doesn't. It's maybe because there is not enough density of it, there is not enough herons to support them, but we can speculate about it a lot, and it will be fitting the hypothesis to the data. What I can say, it's underperforming compared to what it did. Still a decent card, slightly less decent than it used to be. Okay, so I'm going to do now a list of the best commons and the best uncommons, I think, hopefully. Yes, in each color, and we're going to start from number 3, and we'll start with white, because we go in the Wooburg direction. So the best commons in white, number 3 is Morning Patrol, at 60.1% win rate. And I think that there are 10 white commons that fit between 59.5 and 60.1% win rate. So this one is probably just a fluke that Morning Patrol was at the 3rd position. Maybe tomorrow something else will be, because they are quite close to each other. But it's worth noting that this card is there. Number 2 is Lunarch Veteran with 62.3%. That's already a big gap between this and Morning Patrol. And number 1 is Fierce Retribution. I told you that this card overperforms by a lot, and it's 63.8% win rate. Mark that 2 of the cards are double-faced, and 1 is a decent removal. And that's going to be a theme of this white analysis in double feature. So no surprises, there in terms of the top two. I think that Lunark Veteran, we already had a discussion how good it is, and it's still good. And Fierce Retribution just, I think, gains as a solid removal in this format, especially that it can deal with any kind of threat in the later game when you actually need to deal with those threats. Morning Patrol is a bit of a surprise. So the best uncommons in white is number 3 is Borrowed Time with 61.7. Number 2 is Ambitious Farmhand at 62.1. And number 1, and that was actually a surprise to me, was Twin Blade Geist with 62.1. But we have two aggressive creatures that have a second life. Let's put it like that, because Ambitious Farmhand can flip when you have Coven, and Twin Blade Geist can actually boost some 2/2 flyer to make it a problematic threat, and another good removal in Borrowed Time that can deal with any kind of threat. So actually, it's a mirror image of commons and uncommons. They do the same kind of thing: 2 removals, and so 1 removal in each rarity tier, and 2 double-faced cards that are good in aggro and quite cheap and aggressive. In blue, we have the number 3, we have Flip the Switch at 63.1, so slightly higher than the commons in white. When it was 63, would be already close to the number 1. Number 2 is Organ Hoarder, which pipped the Flip the Switch by probably like fractions of a percentage point, because it's 63.1 as well. But number 1 is Revenge of the Drowned by, well, considering that it has to compete against Organ Hoarder, by quite a lot, because it's got 64.5, so 1.5 percentage points higher than Organ Hoarder. So Revenge of the Drowned turns out to be a superstar of this format and posts amazing results. It maybe also has to do that everyone knows that you should draft Organ Hoarders, but maybe not everyone figured out the power of Revenge of the Drowned, especially when someone didn't draft Midnight Hunt and moved from Crimson Vow to try to draft double feature. Okay. Best uncommons in blue. Number 3 is Overwhelmed Archivist at 62.9. So notably, wouldn't make a top 3 of commons with that win rate, but it makes top 3 of uncommons, which makes you think blue is pretty strong at common level. Number 2 is Scab Wrangler at 63%. Again, wouldn't make top 3 in commons, but makes top 2 in uncommons. And number 1 is Diver Scab at 64%. Diver Scab, famously snubbed by my colleagues from Limited Resources, who said that the card disappointed. I think that this card everything but disappoints in double feature. It's an absolute all-star, but still has a lower win rate than Revenge of the Drowned by a half a percentage point. It's there at 64% win rate. But Diver Scab is great, and I think like curving out end of your turn, Revenge of the Drowned, my turn, sacrifice the Decade token, play Diver Scab is just going to be backbreaking for the opponent. So yeah, don't sleep on the Diver Scab. If you play blue, just play it. Any combination of blue, it performs really well. Best commons in black, and we start with the surprise one. No Way Out, 61% win rate. I think that possibly because of the people playing bombs, and because it's a good like top end in a sort of aggro curve out deck like a white black, it performs pretty well. It doesn't have a large sample size, but it seems that people that play it do very well with it. At number 2, we have Eaten Alive with also 61%, with a massively bigger sample size than No Way Out does, but same win rate. And number 1, Ecstatic Awakener at 63.3% win rate. The card is just good. With uncommons, we have number 3, Morbid Opportunist at 62.6, so slightly lower than Ecstatic Awakener. You know, these things are close. It can vary in the next couple of days. Still, Morbid Opportunist is a good card. At number 2, we have Foul Play, 63.1. And Parasitic Grasp at number 1 at 63.7. So notice that with 6 cards that we looked from black, we have 3 removals and 1 sort of pseudo removal. No Way Out. It removes potential threats. Well, yeah, that's true. 5 of the 6 black cards are from Midnight Hunt. I think Isaiah observed it very astutely. Uh, in blue, 1, 2, 3, also 5 out of 6 are from Midnight Hunt. Only Diver's Cub is from Crimson Vow. In white, 1, 2, 4, 2. So 4 Midnight Hunt cards and 2 cards from Crimson Vow. So yeah, Midnight Hunt definitely wins in terms of power levels in those colors. But keep in mind that we started with Esper color combination, and Esper colors were super powerful in Midnight Hunt. So maybe that's the reason for that. Also, worth noting that only one double-sided card in blue made the top freeze. It was the Overwhelmed Archivist. So maybe let's look into the red. And we start with Neonace Ratchet number 3. Midnight Hunt card. Red was rubbish in Midnight Hunt, but still we got a red Midnight card hunt. Moonrager Slash, another Midnight Hunt card. So both of them have around 60.5, 60.9% win rate as commons. And the top common still Flame Blessed Bolt at 61.6. I hope that you can see a trend. All 3 of them are burn spells. It seems removal is just very important for the red decks. From memory, I can tell you that just below Neonate's Rush was the Abrade. I think it was 60.4, so it just missed out by 0.1 percentage points, which, with the variance in those data sets, it doesn't mean anything. So Abrade is there. Don't Abrade is not bad in this format. It's just slightly below Neonate's Rush. So top 4 red commons are burn spells. Best uncommons at 3 we have Alluring Suitor. Finally, that's the second Crimson Vow card that we have. Number 2 is Vampire's Vengeance, and that actually did surprise me. It posts really good numbers, 61.8% win rate for Vampire's Vengeance, and number 1 is Rending Flame. So finally, we have a victory for Crimson Vow with 4 out of 6 cards being from Crimson Vow in red. And, Abrade missed out by a pip. So it was almost 5-1, but not quite. So again, we have 2 burn spells and only 1 creature. So it's quite interesting to see how important are those red removal spells. And especially in those aggressive red decks where you want to play 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and then burn. Like a couple of days ago when I was streaming, I lost 1 game, and that game was I played a creature, burned. Played another creature, burned. And at the same time, a 2-2, 3-3 was attacking me continuously, and I just couldn't do anything. Everything I played was burned, and the game was over. I couldn't get out, even though my deck was pretty cheap. And I was maybe, I could have raced it if I started the game, but no, it just didn't happen. Okay. Oh, I didn't put any. Okay. Best commons in green. At 3 we have Massive Might with 58.7. And note that this is the first card that has under 60% win rate, which should point you to green being markedly weaker than any other color. Number 2 in commons is Wolf Strike, 59.8. And number 1 is Eccentric Farmer, a card that people still underappreciate compared to where it should be. Eccentric Farmer, I think it's a necessary condition for some decks to actually start working, to have 1 or 2 of them, and Evolving Wilds. So we have 2 cards from Vow and 1 from Midnight Hunt, markedly lower win rates. In terms of uncommons, all 3 of them Midnight Hunt. Rise of the Ants, number 3 at 60.5. Dawnheart Mentor, 61.3. And Clear Shot at 61.9. So what we have is 2 bite spells, Wolf Strike and Clear Shot, a combat trick in Massive Might, a ramp, not a ramp, a land draw, a good rate creature with Eccentric Farmer, and we have Rise of the Ants and Dawnheart Mentor as a sort of drop 2 creature for 1 card, and then still have some effect for later game in both cases. So I guess that this is the version of green you want to play. You want to play it for maybe slightly longer game, maybe less aggressive and all-in strategy. Have some kind of controlish plan for the late game. So yeah, out of the 5 colors in 4, it was a pretty decisive victory of Midnight Hunt cards. Thank you very much, Isaiah, for observing that. I didn't actually think about it when I was making the presentation, but we can re-improvise. Now I have a couple of slides about each archetype. Try not to make them too lengthy, but let's look at them. Every archetype will have same 3 categories of cards that I selected: top, signpost, uncommon, top card in general. Unless the top card is the signpost, then I pick the second best card. And 1 card that I arbitrarily selected as the overperformer for the archetype that I thought might be as interesting to notice. So first of all, top, signpost, uncommon, we start with the Azorius. Top signpost uncommon is Brian Comer, 66.4% win rate. No surprises there. I think Brian Comer is very good, and I guess it's just slightly better than the Devoted Graphkeeper. I think that there was 2 percentage points different between those. Top card altogether, and okay, again, I'm not looking at rares and mythics. I don't think that it's interesting enough, especially with the numbers of them are not large enough to draw any kind of conclusions about win rates most of the time. But top uncommon is or common is Diver's Cub with 69.4% win rate. That's just a lot. Again, this card is really good. Drafted, just drafted. It makes so much, and the 3/5 body is just so relevant. And the card I selected as an overperformer is Geistlight Snare. The 3 mana leak, but it can cost down to 1 if you control a spirit and enchantment. And this one has 67% win rate, and I don't know why, but maybe if you have a spirit on the battlefield, people just don't play around it and just barge into it because they think, oh, maybe they have a syncopate. I'll just play something with 1 mana spare, and boom, Geistlight Snare does its job. So maybe that's the reason for its overperformance. It had slightly lower numbers, so maybe like really good players only play it, and that's why it has an elevated win rate. So yeah, and here I have tables with the top 10 commons and uncommons. In commons, we have like Organ Hoarder, Farctal Abomination as the top cards in the white blue. Then there's Fierce Retribution, Revenge of the Drowned. Shipwreck Sifters is still good, but I assume that it's also a smaller sample size of people that got multiples of them. Oh, very good point from Pipe Poker that counters are better in a bomb-heavy environment. That is true. You want to drop your early stuff and then wait for this bomb to drop. And then we have Lantern Bearer, Cradle of Safety, Syncopate, Startle, Geist Wave, like all the kind of like cheap interaction is there. As you can see, there's more interaction than actual creatures in this list. So probably creatures you want to go to the uncommon tier, and you got cheap interaction at the common level that you might want to prioritize. Uncommons, as I said, Diver's Cub is the top one, but we have Overwhelmed Archivist as the second one. Then we have the Snare that I told you about. Twin Blade Geist. I thought that this card will not be super great in white-blue, but it has a very good numbers there as well. And then we have Brian Comer, Fading Hope, Devoted Graphkeeper, Thirst of Discovery, Ambitious Farmhand, Nabelgast Intruder. As you can see, there's plenty of this instant speed interaction. The Geist Waves, the Startles, the Fading Hope. So Thirst is pretty good because you want to keep your mana untapped. If you don't play your interaction spell, you play Thirst and draw some cards. So that gains, I think, in the pick order in this kind of format. Right. White-black. Top signpost is the Flesh Taker with 63.6% win rate. There are no surprises there. It's a very good card. Top card in general is Morbid Opportunist. with 70% win rate. This is insane. This is like, coma levels. I don't think even coma got to that. But of course, it's driven by the fact that we're talking about smaller sample sizes, and we're talking about a format where the average win rate is around 59%. And the overperformer I selected is Resistance Squad, a card that maybe people would associate with playing white-green, but it actually doesn't do particularly well in white-green. It does really, really well in the white-black. As you can see, like all three cards that I selected, best signpost, best card, and the overperformer are all human. So it's surprisingly a lot of human synergies in the white-black. So don't sleep on Resistance Squad in these decks. They want to be grindy, and grindy decks, the problem for them is running out of cards. And both Opportunist and Resistance Squad provide you the card draw, and Flesh Taker does provide some kind of card selection because you can scry, with couples of scry, you can count it as drawing a card because you will, for example, put a useless card or a land under and then draw something better for that situation you're in. So if we look at the top commons, Ecstatic Awakener, surprise, surprise, then both versions of Evolving Wilds are doing well in this archetype. I guess, thinning the deck ever so slightly, getting the right color combinations. There's plenty of double cost cards in these colors, so maybe that's the reason for them. And then we have Eaten Alive, Crawl from the Cellar, which also performs very well across the archetypes. I think that this is a card that you can think about when you're drafting. And then we have Fierce Retribution, No Way Out. This is a perfect card for this deck. Grindy deck, gets rid of two things. That's fine. It's a 2-for-1 for you. And we have Hobbling Zombie, Candlegrove Witch, and Diagraph Scavenger in the top 10. And for the uncommons, and they are all between 65 and 61% win rate, which is still impressive. And then we have the Morbid Opportunist, Resistance Squad, Gavony Dawnguard, another card that will let you draw these extra cards and never lose steam in the grindy thing. Foul Play, another card that will replace itself over the longer game. It was just under it, I think. Pipe Poker says that he's surprised that they don't see Rite of Oblivion on the list, which we'll get to. There is no Rite of Oblivion on the list. I think it was just under. But we then have Foul Play, another card that draws. Fell Stinger, another card that draws. Ambitious Farmherd, another card that draws. Flesh Taker, as I said, a thing that scries, which can be sort of like a draw later. Chaplain of Arms, two-sided card, so sort of natural 2-for-1. And then we have Parasitic Grasp, just a pure rate, and Angelic Quartermaster, again, pure rate. It's basically 5 power, 3 of which is flying for 5 mana, so that's a great thing to finish your game with, I guess. So this all points into this kind of very grindy 2-for-1 driven archetype, like Crawl from the Cellar, another 2-for-1, by the way, I might mention. And, Diagraph Scavengers, I don't know how much for 1, but a lot for 1. And yeah, again, Ecstatic Awakener can be easily a 2-for-1. Okay, Boros, which is the surprise overperformer of the double feature. Top signpost uncommon. Sacred Fire, it has 68% win rate. It's also the best card in the archetype. So instead of giving a top card, I gave the second one, and that's Lunarch Veteran. So Lunarch Veteran is great in this thing because it allows you to race and not care about attacks of the opponent because you will gain a couple of lives, and that will make you win the race. Lunarch Veteran, 66.7% win rate. The overperformer I selected was Cathar Commando. I think that 3-1s are the thing that makes aggro decks much more feasible in the double feature compared to Crimson Vow, where the lack of 3-1s was, I think, one of the biggest problems that you had with the training archetype. Because I think that if you would be able to play turn 2 3-1, turn 3 2-1 flying with training, turn 4 swing and get a 3-2 flyer at least, that would be much better than having to wait till turn 5 to attack with something that would make the flyer slightly bigger. And that, I think, in my opinion, this doomed this card. I still think it should have been a 2-2 first of all, if you wanted to make this deck feasible. and then some free ones would have made the training deck better without actually having to boost the training creatures themselves, because again, boosting training creatures is problematic from many ways. Okay, so archetype specific cards. We have Lunarch Veteran as the top common. Then we have Abrade, Flameboss Bolt, Blood Petal Celebrant, Cathar Commando, Search Party Captain. Do you see the theme? Cheap creature, removal, also cheap. Cheap creature, Search Party Captain. Thing that gets better when you have cheap creatures. Fierce Retribution, cheap removal. Homestead Courage, which is performing very well in this archetype. Voldaren Stinger, cheap creature, Moonrager / removal. So basically only cheap creatures and removal. And then this is at the common level. At the uncommon level, we have Sacred Fire, Voltaic Visionary, removal, cheap creature, Sunrise Cavalier, very well statted 3-drop. Mark of Waltzer, very well statted 4-drop. And you can see that in top 4 uncommons are all the 3 signpost uncommons. So this is why Boros will be good. It's underdrafted. Because it's underdrafted, you will get all the copies of those uncommons that are there on the table. I did 7-0 with a red-white deck, and I have 2 Waltzers, 1 Cavalier, and 1 Sacred Fire in it, because the color pair was clearly open, and the rest I just filled in with like whatever's. So Isaiah says the green 3-1 with Coven was really good. I bet it's great with training as well. I was speculating on that in the previous episode when I was talking about double feature before double feature. It does perform well. It doesn't perform as well as I thought it might have been, but it performs decently. Then we have the top end of the deck, Dual Craft Trainer with 63.8% win rate. You know, the selection of the cards that you have here will have 1, 2, and 3 power a lot. And Dual Craft Trainer will very frequently instantly have Coven, which, you know, with couple of the evasive threats, with couple of first strike threats, you will be able to push copious amounts of damage with the Dual Craft Trainer. Like with Stinger, you can easily make your own Coven because you can pump it up and things like that. Then we have Chaplain of Arms, which is, again, performs very well. I think that, you know, pushing 3 damage early and then maybe flipping it and protecting your creatures while being a threat in its own right, that's a very good ability. So Chaplain is at 63.2. And then we have Ambitious Farmherd, Twin Blade, Geist, Alluring Suitor. All of those things are very well statted creatures that grow with the game very well. And I think that this is the strength of the white-red. And I'm expecting white-red to be even stronger when you draft it in... No, Traveling Minister has slightly lower numbers. It almost made the list of the underperformance, but I just couldn't make myself to do it. But Traveling Minister is markedly worse than it was in its original format. I think mainly because Lunarch Veteran just does the thing better. I don't know. No, I couldn't. Minister is my all-time favorite. So no, it was the 11th card, and I only put 10 selected underperformers. But it was there and about. But you can see the picture of this white-red deck. It's just like on the common, you just focus on 2 drops and removal, and on the common, you focus on removal and multicolor cards and some top end or some cards that can really grow with the game to get the best results in it. White green top signpost, and that surprised me quite a lot. Is Join the Dance. Join the Dance does well, much better than the Sigarda's Paladin, and I don't even remember what is the white-green card in the Midnight Hunt, the creature card. Which one was that? Can the chat remember what is the white-green signpost from Midnight Hunt? Because this is the flashback spell, so clearly not the... that's been a while. Anyways, Join the Dance is the highest win rate, but it's 59%, so markedly lower than other signposts that we talked about before. Top card in the whole archetype is Fierce Retribution. That includes uncommons. So Fierce Retribution is the top card in white green, counting the uncommons and all the shebang. And the overperformer I selected was Soul Guide Griff, with the 3/4 that exiles something from the graveyard when it enters the battlefield, with 60. No, but there are three of them in each format. Join the Dance is the flashback spell, but there must have been also a white green uncommon creature, no? Oh, Don't Hunt Wardens. That one was just below Join the Dance, but it was worse. Thank you very much, Isaiah. So I selected Soul Guide Griff because this card performs really well in the archetype, and it's worth noting. Again, numbers not amazingly large for it, if I remember correctly, but the 62.7% win rate, like almost 4 percentage points higher than the best signpost, that's quite impressive. And Stoneheart Wardens is a really well statted creature, so I guess you either want to go wide or you want to go above your opponent, it seems. So the commons, what we have is Fierce Retribution. Soul Guide Griff is the second best common in the archetype, and also like only 3 uncommons have better win rate than it. And then we have Evolving Wilds, Lunarch Veteran, Wolf Strike. Here we have Traveling Minister, Cigarra's Imprisonment, Eccentric Farmer, Gavony Trapper, Massive Might. So not much of a top end, not much of a low end really. It looks pretty weird, this list. But there's plenty of removal. There's Retribution, Wolf Strike, Imprisonment in there. At uncommon, the best uncommon in the color combination is Circle of Confinement. Then number 2 is Twin Blade Geist, again overperforming in yet another archetype. That's already third archetype that we see it in the top uncommon list, and maybe that's a clear message there. Then we have another removal in Clear Shot. We have a Death Bonnet Sprout, Chaplain of Arms, Hound Tamer, Infestation Expert, Join the Dance. Dawnheart Wardens is it was just 0.2% below Join the Dance, so still good. And Dormant Growth is sort of equal with the Dawnheart Wardens. So the picture I get from there is a sort of mid-range. As in most people will say that don't be mid-range, I think that white-green, the answer is be mid-range. Don't focus on any synergies, whatever. Just put good rate monsters, put some evasion in, put some couple of combat tricks. Gavony Trapper is great because it builds up the Coven as well. Sorry, I have to read the question. Isaiah says, seems like sample size is not very large because of how the two different copies of Evolving Wild are appearing. Only one copy in this list and almost a whole percentage point different in the last. Am I misunderstanding? I mean, you would expect the sort of like between plus minus 2 percentage points for each card. That's your confidence level, more or less, based on the numbers that we're having here. And yes, I think that white green has not huge sample sizes. However, from the experience of previous sets, there will be changes in how those cards look in terms of win rate and whatnot, but it's not dramatic. It's not dramatic in terms of how those win rates change. But yeah, I mean, one Evolving Wilds is missing from this list. I don't remember if it was just below or, but in some cards I saw quite big, like 2.2, 2.5 percentage points differences between two copies. It was mainly for Snarling Wolf because Snarling Wolf has even smaller numbers. But here we're talking that, yeah. No, that's all fine. That's all fine. The numbers are not great, but as I said, from the experience with other sets, we know that even at those smaller numbers, the card win rates usually stay all through the format once you get the higher numbers. So, as I said in the beginning of this presentation, because of the sample size, take those numbers with very great caution, but also don't ignore them. So they are good pointers. They're not written in stone because no number is written in stone. except for of course the stone written number. Um, yeah, this is more advisory than I'm not going to tell you this is how it is. Fierce Retribution is the best common. But if I see Fierce Retribution being a best common in every single archetype that contains white, and the numbers are really good and solid, and I know that in previous sets, once the card was number one in terms of win rate, it usually stuck through most of the format. And if it changed, it's because the deck changed, not because the card power changed. I'm sort of tending to trust it. So I think that the best strategy is like if you see a card winning a lot, better trust it. If you see a card losing a lot and you think that the card is actually better, then you should trust yourself more, because maybe you have the plan that people that deliver the data did not. So stick with your gut feeling when you think that the card is better and you have data to prove it or track record of some sort, even if it's a very small sample size, because maybe you figured out a plan. If the card is overperforming and you think, no, this card is trash, um, tend to think that data might be right. Maybe you're playing the card badly and not using full potential of it. Okay. But that's fine. If you like playing cards that the numbers don't like, you're in a very good position, because that's how you become better in the late format. Again, if you're interested in looking deeper into that, I highly recommend the episode about the evolution of the format, which is available on YouTube, where I talk about exactly this: how through the format cards become slightly more powerful, slightly less powerful, decks become different, and how to maybe capitalize using data on that and increasing your win rate based on that. See, I'm pushing my YouTube channel to the bone today. Finally, some self promotion. I'm getting the hang of it. Okay, blue black. Top signpost uncommon is Skull's Cap at 62.3. Um, I think that the Blade Stitch Cap was not too far off, so they're relatively close. A top card in the whole was Overwhelmed Archivist at 66.1, which I have to say was slightly surprising for me. And I put the Biolume as an overperformer. This card is just so great in blue-black decks because there are so many ways of sacrificing it. And also, those ways of sacrificing don't only come from Crimson Vow. They also do come from uh, from the Midnight Hunt. What's the name of the Ecstatic Awakener, for example. Okay. Best cards, almost a tie between Revenge of the Drowned and Ecstatic Awakener in the common at 64.8, and just on their heels is Flip the Switch, number 4 Organ Hoarder only, with 62.8. So that's already some gap between those two cards, but again, it's within the variance range. Oh yeah, Eaten Alive is also great with egg. Talking about which, Geistwave and Eaten Alive. Geistwave, I think, gains a lot because you have the exploited creatures. So you make some Decayed Zombies, you play your creature that draws a card, sacrifice a zombie. Later in the game, you actually Geistwave it back, draw another card, replay it, sacrifice another Decayed Zombie, draw another card. And you basically get so much ahead on cards in that way. So Geistwave is performing well, and I think that partially is because of that. And if not, then you remove one big threat, make them replay it, prepare yourself with a counter, for example. It all works very well. As you can see, both Flip the Switch and Siphon Essence make the list. Then we have Eaten Alive that you mentioned. No Way Out, again, making the top 10 list as it did with the black-white. Desperate Farmer, I found this card very important in the blue-black that I trophied with last time, because in a couple of games, I had to go deep in my life, and I stabilized, but I stabilized against decks that can easily draw a burn spell off the top and just kill me, or draw like some kind of a haste fate threat that I couldn't play around because I wanted to kill them as quickly as possible, not to allow them for many draws. And in this situation, Desperate Farmer is great. Also, With Decade Zombies, flipping it is just like, just attack with the 2/2, and you turn your 2/2 into a 4/3 with lifelink. So it's very worth it in many cases. So the Desperate Farmer, I think, slightly gained in this format. And then we have Siphon Essence and Larder Zombie. Larder Zombie is still a good card, don't forget about it. And from the uncommons, we have Archivist, Parasitic Grasp, Morbid Opportunist, Foul Play. These are all removal or card things that draw cards. Biolume Egg, because, well, we talked about it. Um, Fading Hope, Scab Wrangler, Namelgast Intruder, Skull Scab, and Lunar Rejection. And there is one card missing from that list, and that's Diver Scab, and I don't know why. It just does better in the color combinations that are not based on exploit. So that's an interesting piece of information. I'm pretty sure it has a pretty decent win rate and is just under Lunar Rejection somewhere. But it's worth noting that it's not here, and I think that part of it is the instant speed suite of spells in this format. Revenge of the Drowned, Flip the Switch, Geist Wave, Siphon Essence, Lunar Rejection, Namelgast Intruder is a sort of instant spell, Fading Hope, Parasitic Grasp. All of these things are reacting at instant. So maybe you want to drop your like 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, and then you want to keep your mana up because you have your draw spells, you have your bounce spells, you have your counter spells, and playing Diver Scab just opens this window for the opponent to use the fact that you're tapped out and sneak something in. And maybe that's the trap with it, and that's why the win rate is slightly lower. It can be also variance. Okay, blue-red. Top signpost and common, Wandering Mind, 60.5% win rate. Top card, Rending Flame, 67.5. That's a pretty high. Isaiah also noticed that no Infernal Grasp on the list. Yes, and it seems to be that gaining 3 life from Parasitic Grasp is amazing and losing 2 from Infernal Grasp is not amazing. And I played with Infernal Grasp, and I had to fly really close to the sun when I played that card because you just don't have an early game, and against the 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop curve ups, you have a problem if you have Infernal Grasp as your removal. Okay. Top card, Rending Flame, 67.5%. I selected Seize the Storm as an overperformer because it's always an overperformer in my heart. But apart from that, it posts quite good numbers. It's 63.3% win rate. So you can see the theme here, 2 spells, and the signpost that actually is good at getting spells. And markedly, the signpost is not having a very high win rate compared to the other cards that I selected. Okay, so top commons, we have Moonrager Slash, Scattertop, Flameless Bolt, Flip the Switch, Organ Hoarder, Revenge of the Drowned, Startle, Chill the Great, a Braid Larder Zombie. That Larder Zombie on a very small sample size, I might add. But spell, Organ Hoarder, spell, Larder Zombie. 2 creatures that either help you select, or draw, and 8 spells. I guess that you get the picture of what the archetypes want to do. In terms of uncommons, we have Rending Flame, Play with Fire. They're very close to each other, and Scab Wrangler also very close to each other. Diver Scab, this archetype does well, allegedly. Then we have Alluring Suitor, Lunar Rejection, Seize the Storm, Delver of Secrets, Fangblade Brigand, and Cathartic Pyre. And I think, yeah, again, the picture that we can see from there is that you want removal, you want a lot of spells, you want spells that produce the Decade Zombies if possible with Flip the Switch, Revenge, Startle. Then you can sacrifice them to either things like Diver Scab, or you can use them as a Scab Wrangler / Larder Zombie fodder. In the late game, when you played all your spells, you can Seize the Storm, but you can also have the Down to Earth Delver of Secrets plan with the spells. And every removal that you can get your paws on is awesome in this format. So, Isaiah, the problem with looking at the data like this is that Isaiah is writing that Larder doesn't seem as good as this deck to me, but has higher numbers than blue black. So the problem, I think, is that Larder Zombie will not be very frequently played in the blue red deck. It will be played mainly probably when people have, like, I don't know, 7 spells that make a decade token. And then it's very good. But it's going to be a partial selection bias. If you put Larder Zombie in a random blue red deck, I'm pretty sure it's going to perform pretty badly. But there is a selection part of it. So people that want to put Larder Zombie in their deck, put it in a deck when it's actually going to be probably good. So that's how you get those differences. While in blue black, it's more likely that people will put Larder Zombie into every deck that they have because they naturally will be more accommodating for Larder Zombie. So putting a Larder Zombie into an average blue black deck is probably a good idea. Putting an Larder Zombie in the average blue red deck is not a good idea. But when people put it, they have a reason for that. That's, I think, the case. And it might be the same case with Diver's Cup, that people will put Diver's Cup in decks that are naturally good in playing Diver's Cup or Scab Wrangler. It's going to be a subset of those blue-red decks, but in that subset, it's going to be amazing. Okay, blue-green. Top signpost uncommon Winterthorn Blessing, and the card's doing really great numbers in this deck. So don't sleep on it. I think it goes very late, and it shouldn't. Top card in general, Diver's Cup. Diver's Cup is still great. And another archetype that it does well, except for blue black, it does well in every single archetype, which is funny. It might be also that the really good players, they do understand how Diver's Cup works and how powerful the card is, and maybe less invested players that might have a lower win rate will only play it in blue black, which sort of lowers the win rate. There are so many biases in the data that I think that I hate, but well, that's what we have to deal with. So Diver's Cup 67.2% mark in an archetype that doesn't have an amazing win rate. So that's a pretty good number. And the overperformer I selected is Jack-o'-lantern. Small sample size, very good numbers, because I think it just allows you to splash efficiently. And if you remember the beginning of the seminar, blue-green is the only archetype that does better when splashed than it does in the pure two-color version of it. And again, here I think blue-green was generally more popular with the more invested players because it's a much more difficult archetype to draft, and much more invested players know how to splash much better, and that might be the reason. It's also very frequently splashed, and I think like almost 50%, if not more than 50% of the games with the blue-green are the blue-green with some sort of splash. That might explain why Jack-o'-lantern is doing so well. And yeah, if you look at the top commons for the deck, we get, again, Evolving Wilds and Jack-o'-lantern as top 2 commons, small numbers. I think that the second Evolving Wilds didn't even make the cut in terms of the numbers. So that's worth noting that, we're talking small numbers here. And then we have Revenge of the Drowned, Geist Wave, Wolf Strike, Duel for Dominance, Flip the Switch, Dawnheart Rejuvenator, Locked in the Cemetery, Eccentric Farmer. So a lot of interaction, being good, and not many creatures, which means that common creatures are either replaceable in this deck, so you can just put anything. It doesn't really care if you put the 1/1 Death Touch Scorpion or the 3/1 to block X3s. 3/1 for 2 to block X3s. Eccentric Farmer is really, and Dawnheart Rejuvenator are the only creatures that are worth the hassle at common level. And both of them provide mana, which is something you should probably get a hint from. And uncommons, we have the top one is Diver's Cup. Second one is Reclusive Taxidermist. And I think that Reclusive Taxidermist is markedly better here than it was in Crimson Vow, because the mill plan is way better because you have the flashback spells, for example. Then we have Winterthorn Blessing, Scab Wrangler, Clear Shot, Root Coat Creeper. So we already have 2 mana dorks for 2 mana. Then we have Chaser Drake, and I think that Storm Chaser Drake is particularly good with Wintertone Blessing because you can target it, draw a card, tempo something out, do that again next turn. You drew 2 cards, stop them from attacking you forever, and you end up with a 4/3 flyer. Then we have Phantom Carriage, which is like a good top end. Infestation Expert and Death Bonnet Sprout, which is like the mill payoff and an enabler at the same time. Mark uh, just noticed that Spider is not there. It was just below that, but Spider was not there. Okay. So yeah, Isaiah says that combining the sets did a lot to the self-mill strategy. I think so. There's just a bigger like the problem with the Crimson Vow and the Blue Green is that there was just not many payoffs, and it's fun to mill yourself, but if you mill yourself not to get anything out of it, then what's the point? So I think like mulch is better in this format than it was in the previous one. It doesn't make the top 10 common list, but it is better. It's an improvement over what it did before. Okay, black red. So Rakdos, this is the interesting part of that is that obviously vampires were way better in Crimson Vow than they used to be in the Midnight Hunt. So obviously the top signpost uncommon for the format is Vampire Socialite from Midnight Hunt. I think that this depicts the change in the nature of the deck in this format compared to the Crimson Vow. In Crimson Vow, vampires were aggressive but grindy. So they could have explosive starts, but the big power of the deck was the middle of the game grinding because you had so much blood that you can just chuck all the lands and always have gas and you never run out of cards. Now in this format, you will get significantly less blood, but you will have good quality vampires. So Vampire Socialite is gaining a lot because the card is really strong. It has menace. It can pump your whole team basically. And it will pump the team later in the game as well if you manage to push some damage. So it's good, and 2 mana for 2/2 menace that can pump the team. It's great because good early, good late, whatever. And I think that's why it's better than the Blood Harvester in this format, because Blood Harvester was more of a grindy card. I'm gonna play some creatures. Later in the game, I have this free blood. I'll sack it, reanimate it, replay it, kill another thing, whatever. But now you just don't have enough blood to make it a reliable plan. Top card in general in the archetype is Play with Fire. Call it what you want, but cheap removal is still good. But Better Shock is the best card in the archetype with 64.7% win rate. And the card that I selected as an overperformer is the Wedding Invitation with 63.3% win rate. Wedding Invitation is just very good with vampires when you can reliably gain 4 life and make something unblockable. So it can be good defensively, it can be good offensively. You get the card. You get the card even if your color screwed. So it's all good. What do you mean better than Flameless Bolt, Isaiah? Play with fire? Well, I mean, the going faith part and the scrying is pretty decent. Exile is also good. So top commons we have Wedding Invitation is actually the top common in the archetype. Again, caveat, sample was not amazing for that card. Then we have Neonate's Rush. It's great with vampires, costing 2 mana for basically cycle it to maybe kill some X1 or maybe finish off something bigger. It's great. Eaten Alive. Card is doing very good job in this format. We have Diagraph Scavenger, quite surprisingly, in number 4. Then we have Voltaren Epicure, Evolving Wilds, Flameless Bolt, Ecstatic Awakener, Abrade, Crawl from the Cellar. So cheap creatures, not necessarily vampires, whole removal suite basically, and some things to get late game card advantage with, like Crawl from the Cellar. And the uncommons, we have Play with Fire, Foul Play, Vampire's Vengeance, so 3 removals in top 3. Then we have the Vampire Socialite that I mentioned in the signpost and uncommon section of this one. Parasitic Grasp, Lamphold Raconteur, I assume that this is based on small sample where you got the kind of spelly version of it. Dreadhound, which also I found interesting. Then Voltaic, Visionary, Lunar Frenzy, and Alluring Suitor. So basically, you have like cheap creatures and a lot of removal, and some top end things that can finish off, like Lamhort Raconteur can do that, and Dreadhound can do that. Black, green, and I have only this slide that says just don't play it. I looked at it and there was not enough data for uncommons to even make a list of the cards. And based on that, I just decided not to make anything with it. Because if you only have like 3-4 uncommons that make the cut in terms of the sample size, the archetype is performing as the poorest one of all of the archetypes analyzed when I looked at the included the splash data. It's probably just not worth playing it. Try to avoid it unless you have a really good reason to play black green. And there's definitely not enough data on it to try to draw some kind of a coherent picture of what it wants to do. And the last one, red green. Top signpost uncommon is Child of the Pack. But look at the numbers, 55.9%. That's probably the lowest number we've seen all day. Maybe except for the slide when I showed the win rates from older formats. Top card and the archetype is Rending Flame with 63.8. So like almost 9 percentage point difference between the top card and the top signpost uncommon. So the problem with red green is that when I showed you white red, in the white red, in top 4 cards of the archetype, you had 3 signpost uncommons. So basically, it's just enough that the color is open and you will get really good cards because you're going to get past all those signpost uncommons at some stage. In green red, you have to somehow deal with the fact that even if it's open as a color pair, if there's anyone drafting red somewhere close to you and anyone drafting green close to you, you might end up with like drawing tribe because you will not be rewarded with those amazing win rate signpost uncommons because they don't perform so well. So you want good red cards and good green cards. So you cannot only draft it when the color pair is open. You need to be specifically in the place where both red and green are flowing, and no one is challenging you in the nearest neighborhood, and you can get all this stuff. Or maybe you can get there because you opened some busto bombs in the color pair, like Halana Alena. The point with Halana Alena, you can splash her easily in blue green. Anyway, top overperformer that I selected was Might of the Old Ways, because I thought the card has over 60% win rate in this archetype, so almost 5 percentage points higher than Child of the Pack. And I don't think that this is a card that people put a lot of hopes in when they see it, and they're just like, oh well, there's nothing in that pack, just the Might of the Old Ways. Well, actually, in red green, it seems like it performs quite well. So maybe it's easy to get Coven in this format, and maybe the pumping sort of play a trick, draw a card is the way to do it. Okay, so archetype specific. Top common, Might of the Old Ways. Surprising, again. Caveat, small sample size. Then we have Evolving Wilds, Blood Petal Celebrant, Spore Crawler, Flameless Bolt, Dawnheart Rejuvenator, Eccentric Farmer, Wolfstrike Evolving Wilds number 2. See, around 2 percentage point difference between the two different versions of Evolving Wilds. And Short Strike. So we have a combination of removal, decent mid-range creatures, and combat tricks. And then the uncommons, we have Rending Flame, Dormant Grove, Rise of the Ants, Bramble Worm. So basically removal and a bunch of mid-game to top-end stuff. Alluring Suitor, which is a good ramp spell when you think about it. When you play a couple of early things, attack with them, and all of a sudden you go from 4 mana to 6 mana, you can play your top end. Infestation Expert, Flame Channeler, Outland Liberator, Reclusive Taxidermist, Hound Tamer. So again, it looks like red-green, what it wants to do is not really lean on the werewolf synergies, have some of them because you will have some good werewolves like the Infestation Expert or Hound Tamer, for example, but don't lean on the werewolves. Just lean on good mid-rangey to top-endy cards and some ramp. And that's a picture of this archetype. Whew. Right, that took a long time, but we got there. So I would like to thank the 17 Lance team. Viral misnomer as always, Mr. 17 Lance himself. Hululu and Grant Wu, amazing guys that did so many features in the 17 Land arsenal. And for the people that listen to this in the podcast version, I'd like to thank Fake Jake Brown for helping me to organize podcast. And I would like to thank Asescu and Mana Junkie for providing me with the opening credits music.